Hi, I'm Sausan Bukhari, a social entrepreneur and the force behind Bandra Info, where we bring stories, people, and events that make our neighborhood the unique place that it is. It's a pleasure to be your host on the Bombay Blueprint, where we explore the vibrant culture and the living history of our city with the people who fight to preserve it. Today on the Bombay Blueprint, we are honored to have with us my friend, who also happens to be the director of a gallery, Chemould Prescott Road, Shireen Gandhy. Welcome, Shireen.
Thank you.
So tell us, Shireen, growing up at Kekee Manzil, the in and outs of artists while you were a young kid, did you ever envision that your parents were building something much bigger than what they had ever imagined? And an early memory that you have.
So first of all, I have to say that I am only a year younger than the gallery. So
Wow.
so the like what my parents were doing or what was going on and so on was nothing that I was thinking about. Um, not because I didn't want to, but it was just something that I grew up with. It was a very natural sort of thing.
And any memories you have of an artist, of your parents working together, and how that was?
I mean, there's so many memories, but maybe we can go back to how the gallery started, and because that can kind of lead us on to other stories like this.
Yeah.
So basically, uh, Gallery Chemould on the first floor of Jahangir Arts Gallery started in 1963. It was one of the earliest contemporary galleries,
Okay.
which means that you show artists that are of our time in 63. So you had people like Hussain, you had people like S.H. Raza, you had Ara, you had like what today are considered masters, the young JJ school recruits at the time that were kind of becoming.
And was it your dad who was recruiting them, or were they approaching your dad?
So that's 63. Gallery Chemould started in 1963, but actually the story goes back 20 years before that, when the business of my father and his brother and so on was making moldings. The moldings then started sort of translating into actual frames. So we were the only frame molders in Asia, not even India.
Okay.
And then, or the earliest. I don't know if we were the only, the earliest frame molders, and then became the only framing shop, and that was at Princess Street. And while they would be selling frames of, say, pictures of family photographs or God's pictures, and I don't know what else, there was nothing really art in that. There was nothing artistic within the frame. It was always the frame that was the artistic part. That my dad met with two stalwart Austrians. I think one was German, one was Austrian, and they were prisoners of war during Nazi Germany time, and were very, very inclined towards art. One was an art critic, one was an artist himself, and they started finding these young JJ school boys. Now, who were these boys? They were like literally. One was actually he used to wash cars.
Oh.
He used to wash Langhammer's or Rudy von Leiden. I've forgotten which one. He was their car washer, and he turns out to be one of India's most beloved artists, K.H. Ara.
Wow.
Who does these wonderful watercolor flowers, and he's very, very well known for his still lives or nudes. So there was like two things he did, and became very famous for that. And then there was Hussain, there was Raza, there was Bakre, and what was then became the Progressive Artists Group were the artists that got introduced to my dad. And then, as a sort of vanity project for his framing shop, would be putting up pictures of these artists, and became like
in the frame shop.
Yeah, and it became the first salon for art. Before it was a gallery. So like, I mean, you could say it was the earliest gallery.
Right.
And then it was only 20 years later that Gallery Chemould on the first floor of Jahangir Gallery started
Okay.
as a functioning gallery, which then my mother began to look after. She was a more business. I mean, she was not trained to be a business person, but she was a highly intelligent person who had, practicality. My dad was the most impractical person. So they kind of made a great partnership, one who held the string and one who flew, and, like a kite with the ideas. So
That's
it was really
amazing. Well, that's really
a great
amazing.
partnership right till the end.
Yeah. Okay, Shireen. So now on Kekee Manzil and growing up on
The
what
house.
would have been, an art salon there and what formed into the Chemould Gallery eventually. Tell us more about, how that was, the transition.
So, so I mean, the house today is 105 years old. It was exactly the age of my father.
Wow.
He was born in 1920 and he was literally born into the house. So his name is Kekoo. The house is called Keki. So it was kind of the first grandchild. His grandfather built the house. So he grew up in the house. The house was always occupied by the Gandhi family in all kinds of, brothers, cousins. Sort of had a history of their own family, our own sort of ancestral family, which had nothing to do with art. My grandfather was a tobacco merchant,
Okay.
and my dad met. After my dad went to Cambridge and came back during the war, he met a Belgian a person who had a business, and that's how Chemould started. It was an accident. So Chemould comes from chemical molding, the frames that, they're made sort of chemically molded, and that's how the name kind of then stuck.
Versus wooden moldings. So
Yeah,
these are chemical
yeah,
moldings.
yeah.
Okay, so that's where
They
the
were
name.
always wooden moldings, yeah.
Okay.
So that's how it began, and what's your after?
And then about Kekee Manzil and
So growing up, he grew up there with his family, and obviously we all grew up in this house. My brother, my sisters, myself. Many years later. Um, uh, so so by the time I was born, it was already in some ways a house of art. Because don't forget, it's not just 1 year since, because my parents already have associations with artists 20 years before.
correct.
So I grew up very much in a kind of open house. All the bedrooms. It's a huge sort of mansion, but with very few bedrooms. So all bedrooms were occupied, and mine was always the guest room. So
Okay.
I was constantly kind of shunted out or sharing. And as I grew up, if I would be studying, for exams, I would have somebody. It could be an artist. It could be a political figure. It could be a person passing by. My parents had 100 interests. So it was a kind of little bit like a dharamsala, staying in Kekee Manzil. It wasn't kind of at all private. Um, and I didn't grow up with that sense of kind of, it's my room, because there was this constant flow of people. My parents' interests were so diverse. They were part of an organization called Moral Rearmament. So there people would come. My dad had a guru in Ganeshpuri called Baba Muktananda. So his people would be coming, Americans and British and Swiss and God knows what else. And then, of course, I had a growing family with their relatives. But one of the most, there are two guests that sort of remain very embedded in my memory. When I was about 8, my brother got married and went to America. So we had his floor on top constantly free. So, so the guests were always there by then, and they would live for a much longer time. So one of them was S.H. Raza, who lived in Paris. He had a French wife, and he went to Paris when he was in his 20s. So he actually, interestingly, Raza never changed his nationality. He was always Indian passport holder, but very French. his accent became French. His wife was French. She spoke very little English at the time. But because Raza didn't have a base in India, as he was coming back, and he always came back, but he would live with friends and later on in hotels. But he came for the first time for a long period, so it was 6 months. So he stayed with us for a really extended period of time. And because the house was this sort of standalone house with no building friends, and I was pretty lonely growing up there. My siblings were all much older. I actually loved having these people. And Raza and Janine, his wife, became like my playmates in many ways. And I would go up, and Janine would be doing collages, and so I became extremely close to them as a couple, and to her especially, and to him. And in many ways, Raza shaped the way I look at art. And when I grew older and I was in college and go and stay with him in Paris, he would take me to museums, and he would challenge how I would look at art.
Wow.
So I remember looking at Picasso drawings, and they were really, really like quite sexual. And he would like say, so what do you see in it? And what's the first word that comes in your mind? So give you sort of challenging kind of like, you're a young person. So I remember saying, I'm feeling hot. Very good answer. So so it was kind of that was, I think, Raza was very, very important in my life. And any painting I saw in any museum as I grew up, as I was younger, I would always compare it to, do I like it better than Raza? It was always that, it's like, oh, Raza is the best.
Was he the voice in your head a lot of times when you would see art as well?
Not anymore at
Not
all.
anymore.
Because actually it's interesting, because I actually kind of challenged him and he challenged me much
Okay.
in a more polemical way as I grew up. But at that time it was, I'm just saying as a younger person. So that was Raza and Janine. But the other was in 1977, so I would have been 1975, sorry, 1975, 76, I would have been about 10, 11 years old. We had a guest upstairs, and her name was Jaya, for all practice. And Jaya became like totally my playmate. She wasn't allowed to go out. I didn't know that she was not allowed to go out, but she was always at home. So Jaya, as it much later turns out, was a political figure, very, very prominent in Bombay at the time. She was like, ended up becoming a MP, but I didn't know that. And Jaya was her pseudonym. Her name was Mrinal Gore. So for anyone who grew up at that time, she's like a figure that everyone knew. And it was only afterwards that I actually knew the name Mrinal Gore, but because I was this young child of very political parents, but I didn't know she was Mrinal Gore. So she stayed in our house for about 3 weeks, I think, and left our house and went into our neighbor, Mr. Khandekar, and went to jail from there. So it was a time of emergency. So, and if she had been caught in our house, my parents would have been in jail as well. So it was very close, their kind of affiliations were very brave. They were very close to going to jail. And so I grew up in this sort of very political atmosphere. I would be going so post-emergency, it was such a dynamic time,
Right.
because we grew up hating Indira Gandhi, and like having this sort of, she was just not a figure that was on the right side of history at the time. And so when elections were announced, I remember going very clearly to the Bandra Talao and listening to political meetings and listening to somebody like Ram Jethmalani, who eventually became our MP. So all these names were people like, now kind of legendary names who I grew up with, grew up knowing. I'm not saying like I didn't know them personally, but you know, the sort of the founder of the emergence. I mean, the person who battled emergency was Jai Prakash Narayan. I clearly remember seeing him in a meeting. So it was this kind of art politics that kind of that merged and I didn't find there were differences in one
Right.
to the other. Just like
The lines
part
were
of my
blurred
life.
at that
Yeah.
time, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was, I think, your parents' love and passion for both things in their country, I think that
Yeah.
kind of pushed them into not seeing any lines that
Yeah.
define one and the other. What drove your dad to believe that he could unify people,
Sure.
with art, through art?
Yeah, just as much as my father didn't have economic or financial boundaries with people, he also didn't have any kind of, in some ways, no boundaries between his various interests and artists. So so basically, when he had you know, when he had a particular mission in his head, he would involve artists. And artists would feel like, this is not really where we want to go, but they want. So, like, there's this really funny story where an artist called Bhupen Khakkar, who is like legendary artist who would now passed away, had come from Baroda to talk to my father about the next exhibition. And they would go down to Samovar, which was this wonderful cafe in the Jahangir Art Gallery, and over cups of tea and whatever sandwiches, samosas, whatever, would be talking, and Bhupen would be like waiting to ask him, but when, and my dad would be talking about this politician or this movement or the other thing. And this would go on and on and on, and Bhupen would be like,
Poor Bhupen.
he was younger, he was sort of more vulnerable and shy. And at the end, the question was never answered. So, of course, this was Bhupen's favorite story in life as we grew up. He would be narrating, I would come to see your father and he would not answer the question. And I went back to Baroda without knowing when my... So those were the kind of so when you talk about unifying, yes, of course, it's in some ways just bringing all his worlds together. And, when my sister got married, my older sister, she got married to a Swiss man. And when her, she was only about 21. And when she brought her husband to Bombay, my grandfather was extremely, extremely rigid with us marrying Parsis, and he never went to weddings that were mixed. So he was like, you are going to cut my ear. There's a Parsi saying, Mara kaan fati na so. like you will no, sorry, you would not kaan, you would cut my nose. And so my dad was really nervous about this whole thing, and how would he get his daughter married. So he had his guru in Ganeshpuri. So he went to ask his advice and asked Baba, and he was very close to him. And Baba Muktananda, who went on to becoming a really important guru, said, just bring her here, I'll do the wedding. And so he did. And, the wedding happened in Ganeshpuri. But with the wedding was, if you look at the photographs, there's Hussain, there's Bal Chabra, there's Hebbar, so everybody was at the wedding in Ganeshpuri. So art had come with wedding, and Guru and everybody,
and different cultures, everybody's there.
Yeah. And we were Parsis, So so it's interesting because there's nothing a Parsi about my upbringing in that way, other than this very sort of typically Parsi house as one would see it now.
With Parsi food.
Possibly, yeah.
As progressive as it can get, I think even today these things are not so easy to find. Different. It's commendable for your dad. So, Shireen, was your informal education into the arts through your mom? or just of being around the gallery in your home, or
Yeah.
was it your
I mean,
dad?
all of that, my mom, I'm sure my dad, home, friends, all of that. But I was like I was very attached to my mother, and I was right till, the day she died. But I used to like love, because I was like this only child in a house. My outing was to go to the gallery. So of course I knew, how that whole. I mean, I didn't know how the gallery functioned as a child, but I kind of really enjoyed, exhibitions there, and I would like go for openings because otherwise my parents would come home really late. So I would be going from school to the gallery, and so I did grow up with this sort of sense of art around me, but in the space of art, being the gallery. So yeah, I did have a kind of, and then of course my dad would say, okay, so which painting do you like the best? And I was like, point. I mean, these are only stories I hear,
Right.
but
Did you have other interests? Were you ever like did you know that this is what you would
no,
be
not
growing
at
up to
all.
do? Were you
Not at all.
inclined to do
No,
any
I had
other
no.
field? Nothing.
No, I didn't have any ambition. I was a very, very bad student in school.
Okay.
So I didn't know what the hell I was going to be doing in my life.
And when did you realize, okay, this is what I want to do? This is what
Um,
I want to take over.
it was actually, I went to Sophia College. I did psychology. I mean, I did basically liberal arts and then majored in psychology. And then I had no idea what I was going to do with that degree. And when you get into the third year of college, you start sort of, oh my God, real life is going to now hit. And that's when, my mom said that, would you like to come and work in the gallery? I was like so relieved that she even, suggested that, because at that time I really didn't. I was very young, and I'm sure still quite childish.
18, 19, how
No,
old
I was
are
like
you?
maybe about 21
20,
or
20.
something, yeah. But it was a relief to sort of have something to think about. But also, I mean, don't forget, in the gallery we're not like earning pots of money.
Right.
At that time. I mean, art wasn't something that it was like. It was very hand to mouth as I grew up. My parents didn't have like excess money, or I would go abroad on holidays to my sister, but my sister worked in Air India, so I'd get tickets from her. So it was always like free travel.
Right.
At the time it was possible, and so I did grow up traveling a lot, but there was never sense of that we were rich people. I mean, we were not, clearly. So this whole thing of going abroad and all that was like, we didn't have that kind of thing. But my mom, there was some money that was left to my in the name of Shireen Gandhy. That was a relative, because Shireen was a common name. And she said, I kept it for you. And guess how much it was? 50,000 rupees.
No way.
And that was a tuition fee for London, for going to college,
Wow.
And so she just put that aside for me and used that money for me to go to, and it's not even that long ago. It's like we're talking about 88,
Right. And that's where you did your.
So I did my arts
formal
administration, yeah, in City University, and that for me was really sort of opened up my eyes. And only when I was in London for that year did I realize, yes, this is what I want to do. Because when I was in college in London, going to exhibitions and meeting artists, and like I was kind of inclined towards meeting Indian artists, because I was kind of beginning to develop a sense of identity, and that identity came from Indian artists. And there were two, I mean, today really famous. So like I met Anish Kapoor at the time, and I was like, oh my God, he was not that famous, but and then I met an artist called Dhruva Mistry. Dhruva Mistry was at the time more famous than Anish. Today, Anish is like, if you have to count the top 5, he is like one of the top 5 artists in the world. But I remember, like, So I would be like drawn to going to their studio. So already I was going to Anish's studio. I knew Dhruva, then, and any other Indian artist that was in London, I was like going and making friends with. But then of course my horizon widened, and I was like seeing exhibitions. I would be going to openings at the Hayward Gallery. That time the Tate Britain, so I would be going there. Or I mean, I'm not showing off, but I'm just saying that I was really interested and not forced by my mother or anything. Because when I was younger, I was like traveling with my mother, going to museums here, going there, because that's what she did.
Yeah.
It wasn't like something that I wanted to do. But here, this was my life, and that year was just quite incredible. Because then I worked in a gallery in London because they showed Dhruva Mistry. I was like, I chose that gallery, but he was one of the top gallerists, So I ended up doing all their back work of, I don't know, sticking pictures or reviews into files.
Wow.
What interns do.
Okay.
And I also worked in a really amazing gallery called the Whitechapel Gallery. And the Whitechapel, again, because it had a Bangladeshi show. So now when I think back, it was like whatever was South Asian, I was sort of
drawn
to. And so because they were having a show of Bangladeshi textiles, I kind of thought that that's where I want to intern. They took me, and I worked in the education department. So I became very interested in education and art, and then I came back, and it still occupies my mind a lot. How does one sort of merge and make sure that the gallery becomes a space for learning and education? And when I came back, I was like very enthusiastic about that.
And so when you came back from London, what did you come back to in Chemould? What was your...
Yeah, so, like having said that I didn't know what I wanted to do in my life, here I was very clear again, in just like in the matter of this year. And I came back to a very, very seminal point in Indian art, but also a seminal point in the gallery. So two things that happened. One was that Sotheby's or Christie's had a major auction, the first ever. I was still abroad at the time, but they had an exhibition. They had an auction, which the money went to charity to help India, old age people. But it was the first time Hussain and Raza and Tayyab Mehta and all these big names sort of hit the 6-digit. So imagine, I know I've sold Raza even when I came back at 20 and 30,000 rupees, but it was like the first time in an auction that it actually hit 1 lakh. So it was a big moment for art to hit the 6-digit number. I'm talking about rupees.
Oh.
And so there was a kind of like the moment money starts talking, people start getting more interested. The press starts getting more interested. People start talking about art. Till then, no one's talking about art,
What do you think brought about that change in India and the collectors
There
of
was just
India?
a moment, I think, because it's a foreign auction house, there's enough of a sort of weightage with, I think it was Sotheby's, there's weightage with the name. And that's how, there was enough of buzz. There's enough of a kind of like, there's just, it's like a flutter in a certain circle of course they're collectors. It's not like collectors don't exist, but suddenly there are more, and in an auction you can sort of bid and you can up the price, and so from starting at 20,000 suddenly you hit 1 lakh. It was a big deal,
Yeah,
so
definitely.
yeah.
Yeah,
so I came back about that time, a little later, and it was the gallery's 25th anniversary. So that was like a big moment for the gallery, big moment for Bombay, big moment for art. And I sort of like slipped into that. It was a lovely, easy way for me to slide in. And that's how I came into that moment.
And Chemould was the first commercial art gallery in India?
I don't think we were the first. There were a few before that, but like again, for my dad, like it was never 25. If it was 25th anniversary, he fought with my mom. It cannot be called 25th anniversary, and they're much longer. So it was always an ego for him to, like, the number was never correct because
Okay.
it was only 25 years in as a commercial gallery,
Okay.
which by then there were others.
Okay.
So that's why he felt very sort of like, he just, it was a big ego thing with
Short
him.
changes.
Yeah, so it was like at the end it was called, like we were not allowed to call it 25 years of Gallery Chemould. It was 25 years of Gallery Chemould at the Jahangir. So it was
Okay.
specified,